you have no idea what it feels like to feel the United States government on your butt. It's a very unnerving feeling. And these guys were trying to put me in federal prison for up to 2 years. Now, you might say, what do you do? Well, what I did was I gave $20,000 over the campaign finance limit. The campaign finance limit is 10 grand. I gave $20,000 over the limit to a college friend of mine who was running for the Senate in New York. Now, I did it because she was part of my Dartmouth gang when I was in my teens. She was one of the first people I met in America. This was kind of my surrogate family when I got here. She was trying to get me to help her campaign in other ways. I felt really bad, so I came up with a cockamamie scheme. I told 2 of my friends, write her a check for $10,000, I'll reimburse you. Now, this is actually not allowed under the campaign finance law. So I did break the law. But no person in American history who is not corrupt has been prosecuted for doing that. In other words, normally you get prosecuted if you say to the candidate, I'll give you $20,000 under the table, you appoint me to the federal judiciary. Or, in other words, you get something out of it. Whereas in this case, I was helping a friend. She didn't even know I was doing it. So there was no prospect of gain, and there was no allegation that I was benefiting in any way. So this was an unusual case. I was sentenced as a consequence of this heinous offense to spend 8 months in a confinement center on the south part of San Diego on the Mexican border. Confinement centers, by the way, are in a way worse than federal prison, because if you go to federal prison, it's white-collar prison, which is to say mayors and city aldermen and doctors who defrauded Medicare, kind of white-collar guys. You can bring your chessboard. But in a confinement center, you know, it's hoodlums, because it's the whole gamut of criminals who are en route back to society. So if you've served 15 years for armed robbery, you go to a confinement center for 60 to 90 days, and then you're back on the street. You've served your time. But this is the transitional. So I got 8 months with these guys. Now, I wasn't in there in the day. It was overnight. So I check in at 8 p.m., out at 6 in the morning. Right about the time my case is making its way through the court, another guy, this is a guy named Sant Singh Chatwal, Asian Indian guy. We Asian Indians appear to specialize in the campaign finance violations area. Well, in any event, this character gave $180,000 in straw donations to Hillary Clinton and a whole bunch of Democratic candidates. Now, this guy was corrupt. In fact, he said, I'm trying to buy the votes of politicians. Why would they do what I want if I don't pay them? And he was also found guilty of witness tampering because he was trying to get people to lie under oath. This guy goes before a judge in New York. He gets a fine. He gets some community service. No prison. No confinement. Now, the reason I tell you this is because when we talk about justice, it's not enough to say, hey, did you break the law? I broke the law. But you also have to ask, did the penalty fit the crime? That's also part of justice. Another part of justice is, did other guys who did roughly the same thing get roughly the same penalty? If those conditions are not met, then you don't really have justice. You may put up the name justice. It may be the Department of Justice that's prosecuting you, but you're not really getting justice at all. You're getting something that is kind of a sham. And this has been a very eye-opening experience for me because, you know, being subjected to the system in this way, I mean, as an inmate, you see a different side of it. If somebody had asked me 10 years ago, had told me, in the federal prison system, in the federal judicial system, 95% of everyone accused of a crime is convicted, I would have said, so probably they go after the people who commit crimes. 95% of them are convicted because 95% of them are guilty. But when you go into the confinement center and you start talking to people about their cases and looking at their case files, you begin to realize that the whole thing is a lot more murky. and that the old civics book lesson that, better that 9 guilty guys go free than 1 innocent man end up in prison, I would like to tell you that that's true, but it's not true. I'm quite convinced that there are many innocent people who are sitting in our prisons today. Why? Not because they're black, but because of the incredible power of the plea bargaining system. The plea bargaining system basically comes to you and says, we are going to accuse you of a crime. You're a doctor, for example. We're going to accuse you of administering unauthorized pain medicines. Now, this is a very gray area. You've just been administering pain medicine. Is it unauthorized? What does that mean? Well, nevertheless, if we find you guilty, you're going to spend 10 years in prison. You're going to basically destroy your life. However, if prior to trial you plead guilty, we'll give you 1 year in prison and then you're back. You can get your life back together again. Now, I would submit that it doesn't make any difference whether you're guilty or innocent. You're going to take that deal. If you're a family man, you got some kids, you got a life to come back to, you are going to plead guilty no matter whether you are guilty or not. This is our system. So I have come out of it certainly disinfected from some of my adolescent naivete about it. Criminal justice.